All right, folks, let's go out to the White House North Lawn right now to talk about very, very serious issue going on in our nation's capital. We're going to talk with the White House Deputy Press Secretary, Anna Kelly. Great to have you on, Anna. This idea that President Trump has nationalized the D.C. police force is such a long time coming. I've watched that city degrade into literally a hellhole. The left seems to want to frame this in some sort of racist move or some sort of a power grab by President Trump. You know, set them straight. The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I'll say the Democrats will always resort to injecting race in an issue that they know they're losing, because we know back in November that Americans resoundingly elected President Trump for many reasons. Part of that included conducting the largest deportation of migrant criminals in history, and part of that included restoring law and order to our nation's cities. And so it's actually an extremely common sense issue that people are incredibly scared of walking on the streets of D.C. Certainly myself, certainly all of the reporters who cover this building, whether or not they'll admit it. Everyone here is either a victim of D.C. crime or knows several people who are. And so this is a common sense issue that all that President Trump is saying is that we need to clean up our streets, make sure that the citizens and people who visit our nation's capital are safe. I mean, this should be the beacon of our country for people who come visit here as our nation's capital. So this president is making a very common sense action, making sure that the people who live here are safe and increasing law enforcement presence to ensure that criminals are finally held accountable after soft on crime policies.
You know, last night, Maggie Haberman, a well-known New York Times reporter, has covered President Trump, has covered all presidents really for a very, very long time. Well-respected, however, far-leaning left journalist, was on CNN with Caitlin Collins, and they were discussing this, and they were talking about power grabs and you know, overstepping his authority. Now, we know he has the authority to do this. Question is, does he have the authority to, I don't know, do it in Chicago, do it in New York, do it in L.A., which have also become veritable hellholes, just like D.C. has?
Well, look, the president has said this should be we're going to see how this goes. He is taking a really common sense action again to increase law enforcement presence here, federalize our National Guard here in Washington, D.C. It's our nation's capital. But certainly he's looking at all these cities. As you said, there are cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, which again is hosting our 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. There's certainly an interest in making sure residents of all these cities are safe. This president doesn't care if it's a red state, a blue state, a red city, a blue city. Of course, it's mostly Democrat mayors who are enabling these soft on crime policies. But look, this president wants to see all Americans, no matter where you live from, being safe in their communities, being able to walk the streets and not be scared or live in fear of being a victim of a horrific violent crime. Just last month, you had a 3-year-old child who was killed in the backseat of a car in a car seat by a stray bullet. This is unacceptable. There is no level of any of this that should be acceptable to anybody. And so certainly this president wants to address these horrific crimes in D.C. and all across the country.
And it takes a long time for a beautiful city like Washington, D.C. to degrade into the presence it was as of 3 days ago. Decades. In the last 10 or 12 years, the murder rate has doubled in Washington, D.C. The violent crime rate has gone up by 500% in about 12 years or so. He's got 27 more days to clean D.C. up before this little statute of limitations happens, and then he's got to petition Congress again to see if he can get more time. Will he do that? Is there a plan for that? And by the way, I'm on board thinking, until it's fixed, please just stay there.
Yeah, well, he addressed this moments ago. He's certainly going to look into that because he wants to make sure that this city stays safe and beautiful. As he said numerous times, this is a city he lives in, he works in, and so he drives through this city all the time and sees the scourge of violent crime all across the city. And so this president wants to make sure that the city that he lives in, that so many thousands and thousands of Americans live in, is safe. Yes, of course, not just for the next 30 days, but for next several years and for generations and generations to come. And so I think the hope is that this creates a truly lasting change, that, you know, of course, the D.C. police is actually welcoming this partnership because they want to help. They want the help. They want to address some of this violent crime. And so I'm sure that this president is looking into all options to ensure that the residents, visitors, everyone who comes to this great nation's capital can enjoy it fully without being scared of being a victim of a horrific crime.
Now, let's take a look at some of the stuff, some of the antics that are going on, leftist lunatics out there, they're doing. I think we have the video. Watch this video. This is a guy in Washington, D.C. You see, here's a Subway sandwich, and he just slams it on an ICE officer in Washington, D.C., and goes off running. And can you re-rack that and show the beginning? Watch, folks. He's got a Subway sandwich, takes the sandwich, and can you imagine doing that to an officer, a police officer, on the street trying to protect the citizens, and he gets assaulted by this nut job? That guy was caught. Kash Patel said the FBI has arrested the individual. That was last night. He's been charged with felony assault on a federal officer, because that was a federal officer right there. That wasn't a Capitol Police officer right there.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty novel concept, right? If you assault an officer, if you commit a violent crime against anybody in our city, but certainly our federal law enforcement or any law enforcement whose job is to protect the citizens of our city. And by the way, I didn't get to see the video, but this guy was acting like a lunatic, screaming in the officer's face before proceeding to assault him. So yes, if you are assaulting a federal officer in Washington, D.C. or anywhere, you should certainly be charged of assault, because that's what it is. That is a felony offense. And so yes, this president is committed to ensuring anybody who commits a crime in this city is held accountable, that our brave law enforcement officers are protected. Of course, you have Democrats often enabling violence and encouraging it against our law enforcement, against our brave ICE officers. But this president will always back the blue, will always stand with our brave men and women in law enforcement whose job is to keep us safe. And this is just one example of those crimes finally being held accountable.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, I know you can't see that. I apologize. I didn't realize you didn't have a return on that, but you can't see it. But it's a guy in shorts and a pink shirt. He's standing there, and they're ICE officers. They're keeping the peace on the corner in the evening, standing there and just, minding their own business. And this guy goes and confronts them. They don't move, and he takes a sandwich and just whips it at the guy, slams it into his chest. I mean, what world am I living in where you think you can assault an officer and get away with it? And hopefully they throw the book at this guy. I mean, you really need to make an example of him. Anna Kelly, really good having you. I appreciate your time, and a couple of big things coming up, and we'll get you back to talk about some of the next couple of big things with especially the Alaska trip afterwards, and we'll break that all down. Anna, thank you so much for your time.